tonight I'm going to have two extraordinary stories from an FAA certified pilot. And now we're talking with somebody who is a pilot and a mining engineer who had and encountered in 1977 in New Mexico. And his email said, quote, "I was 60 feet from a UFO when it landed in Los Cerrillos, New Mexico in the summer of 1977. And the eyewitness was willing to talk with me on the record, but not with his real name. So I referred to him as J.S. Now, Los Cerrillos dates back more than 1,500 years when Native American Indians mined turquoise from the ground there. Later, Spanish explorers looked for gold and silver, found the metal ores, and they forced the Indians to work as slave labor in the Cerrillos mines. Eventually, the Indians rebelled and the mining stopped until around 1879. And then there was another gold and silver rush for a couple of decades in which Cerrillos grew with hotels, saloons, and shops until the beginning of the 20th century. The mines were considered tapped out. They were closed. But Los Cerrillos still is of interest to mining people and to J.S. and his mining engineer colleague in July of 1977 when they traveled there in two trucks to do surveys and mapping for a proposed mining project. While working outside there the first night, the two men were shocked when an aerial disc landed right in front of them, not more than 60 feet away. Here now is J.S. from Colorado.
We had pulled up the trucks facing each other on this table mesa to have something to work on as a table. So my associate then pulled out a flashlight, and we put the drawings on the top hoods of both cars to plan next day's work activities. Out of the corner of my eye over a ridge, I saw a light coming over the ridge, flying in a specific zigzag pattern that would move very quickly and then stop in the sky. It would do that again at a 90-degree angle from where it started. It did that about 20 times. It began to get closer and closer and closer to us. But the most amazing part was as it came towards us, even at 11:45 at night, this bright light that it had running underneath the aircraft was shining so bright. Light was emitting from the bottom of the aircraft, hitting the ground, and the light reflection was lighting up the entire aircraft as it was coming towards us. But it moved past us and stopped in the air, hovering. There was no sound, no engine noise. There was a faint kind of a mechanical clicking every now and then, but it just hovered in the air approximately about 2 meters or 6 feet above the ground with no evidence of any support. It was circular, about 50 feet in diameter. I could approximate that because the two trucks that we had measures about 40 feet. The upper skin of this disc was flat black, and it had on the edge as a disc, it had lights flashing, approximately 1 foot or so in height. And the colors that were emanating from the edge of the disc was red, green, and yellow in kind of a randomized pattern at that point. From the edge inward towards the center of the disc, it sloped gently up to what I would call a hat, like a center point that was raised. And the reason why I call it a hat is because as it faced forward, if you take a look at the old men's hats from 1940, they were kind of sloped from the front to the back, and they went up high in the back. The height of the hat was sloped lower in the front. So it kind of reminded me looking at an old men's hat from the 1940s.
Was there anything about that center portion that you could see spin?
I could not see anything spinning at all. The aircraft never spun.
The band that had the red, green, and yellow lights in it, was it spinning?
No, it was not spinning.
The lights, did they look like that they were flashing on and off all at the same time or at different times?
Each light, the red, the yellow, and the green were all pulsating at a different frequency, almost like a Christmas tree effect, magnetized 1,000 times because they were blinking very quickly, less than a second apiece.
You mean the frequency in time with which each of these lights was blinking on and off?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
and that they were blinking on and off at different times.
Correct. I realized that there was actually another band of lights on the center towards the top, but it was two colors. It was green and it was blue. And they weren't near the intensity of the other lights that were on the outside of the disk.
Is the blue that you were looking at lighter or darker than a sky blue?
It would be about the same. And then the green would be more like a leaf on a tree type of a green. And then all of a sudden you start to see the bottom was going in a counterclockwise fashion, and the upper one was going in a clockwise, opposite direction. We're kind of at a loss as to what to do next. We don't know whether or not to run. We're just kind of frozen in place. And we're just staring at this disk in front of us. It's hovering. It's not making a sound. It's 50 feet or so in size, and can't believe really what we're looking at. 3 landing legs start to protrude from the bottom of the aircraft. The 2 in the back fall out and lock into the position, and it has about 6 inches to go to land. And then at that point, it starts to lower itself and then set upon those 3 legs. Then there's a bottom door, center of the disc opens up, and a 3-joint articulated arm comes from inside the disc out the bottom. And then as it comes down, it goes and it starts looking at the soil directly underneath the disc, and the light is on it, and it's bouncing back and forth about 3 to 6 inches away from the soil. This happens for the next probably 10 to 12 minutes.
Like it is looking for something in the soil, this robotic arm with the light on the end?
Correct. This articulated arm continued to move around, just looking 3 to 6 inches from the soil with this like burning light. The light was so strong that some of the few pieces of grass that were dried out were being exposed to that intense light and the heat, and you could see smoke coming from those because they were being burned by the light.
Wow.
My associate feels the courage to want to go up and touch it. And my feeling was that we shouldn't do that and we should leave it alone. He starts to walk forward, and I grab him. And we wrestle because I don't think you should get any closer to this thing than we are now. We're probably at that point 40 feet away. I looked up at what we call the hat and then got a better look at the colors that were changing on the top of the hat. And then also above the hat, I was just shocked because at that point I saw 4 distinct letters, USAF. And the letters were approximately 3 to 4 inches tall, clearly visible on the top part of the hat, and it said USAF. 4 letters, distinct letters. They were white, USAF, U.S. Air Force. And at that point, I got also a better look at the outside of the disc because I could see that the color was kind of a flat black. Mm-hmm. Also, underneath the disc, when the light was reflecting off that bright light at the ground, it was reflecting back up beneath the disc. And at that point, I could see that the bottom of the aircraft was metallic, that they somehow had decided to make the top of the aircraft a flat black and the bottom of the aircraft was metallic.
And metallic means silver?
Silver. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so underneath the craft, out of which that robotic arm with the bright light came to apparently look for something in the soil, you were seeing silver metal.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But in the upper part of the craft above the red, green, and yellow lights, you were seeing a flat black, making this, as you call it, the hat. Mm-hmm. And above the blue and green lights on this sort of upper portion, you saw approximately 4-inch high, 4 letters, white, on the flat black that said USAF.
That is correct.
It is possible that the white USAF was put on and to claim territory. What do you think?
I don't know. I was wondering if there was somebody in there, how do you get in and how do you get out? And then how do you drive it? And when we got a close look at the light that was reflecting off the ground that was coming back up to see this metallic part of the bottom, I looked specifically to see if I could see another hatch on the bottom, and I did not see any.
Or this is a drone, that this is an extraterrestrial self-activating machine that has been programmed to do certain work here, let's say on this planet. It doesn't need the prime intelligence in it because the entire craft is an intelligent being, as many people have described over the years, from both military intelligence and people in the human abduction syndrome.
Well, that certainly could be possible because we never did see nobody. But the way it accelerated and the way it didn't make any sonic booms and the way it got out of there was something that I've never been able to fathom how that worked.
So any terrestrial vehicle moving at that speed, 3,000 miles an hour, is automatically going to have a sound barrier breaking boom if it is a terrestrial vehicle. And so it seems logical to conclude that what you and your colleague watched was a technology not from Earth, but from someplace else that has learned how to adapt to the conditions of this planet and does not make booms when it travels from ground to outer space in seconds.
I would agree with that. After about 30 seconds of this, wrestling match that we were having next to this disc, it notices us. And the reason why it notices us, it takes the articulated arm light and points it directly at us, as though it woke up and found out that we were there. Well, that froze us in place. The light was so blinding that we couldn't see the aircraft anymore. We could barely see each other. We covered our eyes.
Was this a white light or a different color?
It was bright white. It hurt to look at it. So we run back and jump in both vehicles, figuring that, what's going to happen next? The articulated arm retracts and goes back up inside, and the hatch door that it came out of closes. There's no light. So when we both decide we're going to start the vehicles up to take off, the lights on the outside of the disc stop. Everything goes dark. His vehicle does not start. It won't even turn over. And I said, come on, let's get out of here. About that time, the disc lights back up again, like it's gone through a startup sequence. You'd think that the noise would be emanating from the disc, but it was actually reverberating from the ground into your feet.
The disc is described as being approximately, from his point of view, and remember he's an engineer and a pilot, as being 50 to 60 feet in diameter with this strange cap. He refers to it as a hat on top. And when he talked about the red, yellow, and green lights that were flashing at all those different time sequences around the large part of the disc, separate from the, we'll call it what he calls the hat or the tower or whatever it is on top, that had only two or so colors in sky blue and green, and that the red, yellow, and green flashing the way they were, he thought of Christmas tree lights. I have seen both a document, and I have talked with people completely off the record who have worked in agencies and do work in agencies concerning extraterrestrial interactions on this planet, whether it's official policy or not. That's happening, and this is true. And they said one of the things that they listen for in eyewitness accounts is when people say it looked like Christmas tree lights. There is something about the frequency of the red and the green and the yellow when they are in some sort of a syncopated flashing. And I've heard that exact description in ranch houses, in farms, when I've gone out on mutilation cases and people have had a disc come right down into a pasture or right into their backyard. I remember one woman in Arkansas said, it looked just like rings of Christmas tree lights flashing on this silver disc in my backyard. So that is a detail that has not been discussed much, and I doubt that most people would have thought about it, but it is one of those serious details. Now, a second is, of course, the surprise, as it was to JS and to anybody listening, I'm sure, that there would be 4-inch high stenciled, let's assume, USAF experimental on the this cap on top of the big disc.